So before we get started, I want to make sure that I am clear with you all on what my focus is when I work with athletes who have fear with tumbling. It is not my main objective or goal to remove the mental block from an athlete. It is not my goal for an athlete to start tumbling. I realize that some of you might be like, wait, why am I here then, Jeff? One, you're going to definitely in 90 minutes understand why, but in a really short, concise way, my objective is to help change the perspective that an athlete has when they're going through a mental block. I realize, as well as in sports psychology, it is the pressure that an athlete either perceives or is actually receiving that is keeping them in a mental block. So rather than focusing on, I have to get over my mental block, and when I'm throwing my tumbling, I'm great, which is a recipe for disaster, my main objective is for an athlete, when they realize that their brain is getting a little nervous, that they don't start freaking out, but instead remember that they have tools and they know how to work through that fear. Let me use a coaching reference. When I work with programs on sports performance, like performance anxiety, trying to reach your maximum potential, one of my goals for teams is to understand you can have the goal to win summit, get top 3 at NCAA, etc. But your team is going to do better. You're going to see less mental performance issues when you focus instead on the things that you can do to achieve this goal. What I mean by that is hard work, determination, perseverance, backup plans, creating trust in your squad. Those are the things, if you focus on those and practice every day, this is going to take care of itself. So let's use that example right here. Rather than focusing on throwing your tumbling, focus on the things that are going to make it easier to throw your tumbling. Regulating your expectations, focusing, using behavioral, mental, and physical strategies. Hopefully everyone right now is like, all right, I understand what your perspective is, Jeff. Let's get started. Awesome. Let's get started. So what we're going to cover today is what is a mental block, how I define it, the science behind fear, which is going to help give you an idea of why I work with athletes in the way that I do. Everything that I do is backed by science, backed by research, rather than trial and error. Third, we're going to talk about the brain and how habits are formed, and then how athletes or you as a coach can retrain new habits in your athletes' brains. We're going to follow my 3 rules, and that's going to lead us into how we can use strategies to help unblock the athletes that we're working with. So coaches, just remember, throw questions up in the chat at any time, and I'll get to them as soon as I could or as soon as I can. So what is a mental block? Well, what we're looking at right here is an athlete who has a back handspring to near perfection. She's done this in front of hundreds of people before, at lots of different places, in front of so many people, and now she's struggling to throw it. My hope as I was talking through that is that all of you watch that video, but also hear how I define a mental block again. An athlete who has a skill, they own it. They have it with excellent technique and form. They've done it in front of many different people, many different places, and now all of a sudden their brain and their body are disconnected. If you watch that athlete's back handspring, when she finally was able to go, that was excellent technique. But if you're like me and you have athletes who represent similar to that athlete that you just witnessed, you probably started to feel a little stress. I know I did. Like, oh my gosh, girl, calm down. Wait, take a breath. It's okay. Okay, stop moving. You got it. If you feel that tension when you're working with athletes, that is a good sign because I want you to learn to use that. Because what ends up happening is most of the athletes that you're sitting here talking with me today or listening from me today is that they have really bad self-awareness. They're disconnected from the signs that their brain, their body, and their heart are sending them saying, hey, I don't feel safe. And so what you can do, the reason I am so glad you are here is that you can use that empathy that you're feeling when you're working with the athlete to your and their advantage, to teach them how to be more self-aware. Essentially, what I want to do is talk about 3 parts of your brain. So do it with me. What we've got here is our hand model developed by Dr. Daniel Siegel. He explains that think of your thumb right here as your amygdala or the protector of your brain. So your little brain here, its job is to keep you safe. What we have here when we wrap our thumb is our prefrontal cortex. This is the rational part of our mind. Let's take a little break for a second. Do you all know when your prefrontal cortex or your medium brain is fully developed, that rational part of your brain? It is not fully developed until you are 25 years old. Thank you, Jenny. Exactly. 25. So the rational part of our brain, the organizer, the part of our brain that has backup plans, the part of our brain, this is all that rational brain, that helps us make good choices is under construction until you're 25. So hopefully you're starting to read into what I'm sharing here. We're asking athletes who are having an overactive little brain to use this part of their brain that's under construction. That's why I love that you're here, because you're going to have an immense opportunity to be able to help these athletes grow this part of their brain. How cool is that? You're going to get to touch young lives and help them develop this thing that's under construction. All right, last part of our brain. That is the part of our brain that covers this whole area, called our big brain or our cortex. Our cortex job is to think and process. It does lots of other things, but let's just keep it simple when it comes to mental blocks. So we've got our cortex or our big brain. Its job is to think and process. We have our medium brain or our prefrontal cortex, which is a rational part of our brain. And then we have our little brain here, or our amygdala, whose job is to protect us. When your medium brain and your big brain and your little brain are all working together, for example, oh, I'm feeling a little scared today. I'm a little nervous. All right, well, why don't we try something that is less scary and then slowly expose ourselves to fear? Our lid stays on. But what often happens with athletes who have fear is that they want a skill really bad. So the cortex is like, oh, I really want my back tuck. Let's throw it. And so their little brain is like, oh, I don't know about this. And then all of a sudden they stand there to go and, and they start getting mad and frustrated. And they do what Dr. Siegel calls flipping their lid. So when your big brain and your medium brain are no longer being good parents to your little brain, you flip your lid. Let's take this outside of cheer. And I know most of you probably work with just younger kids who might not even have mental blocks, but they come into the gym and they don't want to try things, or they run to their mom and dad, or maybe your parent yourself, and you have your kid flips their lid a lot. The idea here is to help athletes, help kids understand when their brains and their bodies are giving them signals that they're starting to flip their lid and then make choices to get their lid back on. My hope is everybody is understanding a little bit more about our brain. Now let's apply this knowledge. So we've got, remember, our calm mind when our lid is on, and then a flipped lid when we're no longer listening to our amygdala. So we talked about our amygdala. There are 3 things I want you to know, or 3 facts about your amygdala, especially when it comes to mental blocks. We talked about the first. Its job is to keep you safe. The second is that your amygdala will store emotional memories. And the third, mental blocks are a sign that your amygdala doesn't trust you. Why do I say that? You got to remember that a mental block is defined by a skill an athlete owns. So if they own the skill, there's no reason for their amygdala to feel the intensity of fear that they have. This is different than an athlete who is renting a skill. Maybe they have bent arms. Maybe they don't have good thoracic mobility. Maybe their legs are a little bent. Their feet are apart. Those athletes don't have mental blocks. Those athletes have just general understood fear. Here's the good news. If you're noticing that some of the athletes that you've labeled or label themselves as, oh, I have a mental block, but you realize they don't meet my definition, you are not wasting your time. Don't hang up, don't log off. You are going to get the same helpful information that even if they have form issues, all of this stuff is going to be relevant and will help them start to calm down, get their lid back on, and start making better choices.